Okay, here we go. Chapter 13, our final chapter for this marketing research course. Chapter 13 is all about communicating your marketing research findings. So you've gone through the whole process from the very beginning of learning some of the very basics of market research, identifying what your research objectives are. You've gone through this whole long process of primary research as well as secondary research and honing in on the specific questionnaire that you're going to be using, your market. So you've done all of this work. So now if you're working for a client or you're producing a result for your company, how do you go about taking that information and communicating it? It's not going to do anybody any good if you've got all of this data and you're not able to pull it together in a format that's going to be useful to someone. So just like when we talked about in an earlier chapter of all of this documentation that goes along with the process of developing a questionnaire and working with a client to get approval of what it is that you're working on, or it would be your manager, you have to be able to assimilate all of that information, analyze it, and put it into a document that is able to communicate and also supports in a way that makes the information that you're providing credible. So this chapter, Communicating Marketing Research Findings, we talk about understanding the objectives of the report itself, so of the research report, describing the format for the marketing research report. So there's a variety of ways that you can report this information, and I'm going to give you an idea of what some of the basic sections or chapters should be in your report. Discussing several techniques of how to graphically display. When you've used a lot of, if you collected a lot of data, or even if you're using secondary data, you've got a lot of information. Not everybody can read numbers and really get an idea of what any of that means, so lots of times there's a better way of at least showing with a picture or pictorially, graphically, of how that information and can kind of pop out what some of those results are. We're going to also talk about clarifying some of the problems you may encounter in preparing the reports, as well as understanding the importance of the presentation itself in marketing research. One of the things that I always talk about when I was a manager and in my classroom is that as a manager, if I had two people who had all of the same technical capabilities or analytical capabilities, those who were able to communicate information verbally, the interpersonal skills, as well as, a written or oral presentation, those were the folks that were going to have a leg up in the job market. So while all of those other analytical skills are very, very important, at some point you're going to have to communicate, whether it's communicating to your peers, communicating to your management, communicating to some other a board or team that is interested in your research, or ultimately, if you're working for a market research firm, reporting your information in a clear, concise, understandable way to your client so that you can, seal the deal and deliver the results for the money that they've paid. So let's start with talking about understanding the objectives of a research report. The key objective of a marketing research report is to provide the client, again, with that clear, concise interpretation of the project, of the research project. The report really is a way of pulling together everything that you've done to this point and communicating not just all of the information, but the results and what the implications are. It's got to be, you've done everything in a systematic manner. This will also be done in a systematic way. And the other objective is then to provide accurate, credible, and easy to understand information. So again, it's the background work that you've done that provides the credibility to the work that you've done, and then is providing it in the information in a way that is usable. The format of a marketing research report has a couple of sections, or actually quite a few sections. The first, you're going to have some sort of a title page, and lots of times that's going to be either a logo or your logo or the client's logo may be included on the title page, table of contents, an executive summary. An executive summary is really, really key. The executive summary really provides kind of a snapshot of everything else that's in the report. So you're going to go into detail in all of these other chapters, but the executive summary really is an important section in a report, because lots of times senior managers that are really need the information in order to maybe make some key decisions, will use that section to figure out which other sections they need to go to. So yes, you'll have the table of contents, but the executive summary really is a way to get the hook and help the executive understand where they really need to go into the report and get additional information. So that's kind of where you're selling them on the rest of the document. The executive summary itself will include a statement on the research objectives. It will talk about the research method and procedures. It's going to include a statement of the findings, a brief statement of the findings, as well as the conclusion and your recommendations, if that's what you've been asked to do. So after the executive summary is where you go into the details of each of those things. So you're going to have an introduction. The introduction of the report there will also be a description of what the methodology is. So all of those chapters that we've gone through, how you've gone about coming to the study that you ended up doing, and what statistical methods you used, why you used those statistical methods. You go into the next section, which would be the analysis itself. So not just the methods, but what is it that you learned from the analysis. So in some of those chapters we talked about, it's not only important to be able to accurately work with the statistics, but what can you infer, what can you include from the data that you've collected and the analysis that you've performed. And then the final elements are the conclusions and the recommendations. The conclusions are, again, how where you end up with your recommendations, or what the bottom line becomes when you're for your research. And then usually there's some sort of a section on limitations, and that has to come back. That comes back to it could be the limited nature of your sample, how generalizable it is to the population, why it wouldn't be generalizable, or what maybe a follow-up kind of a recommendation might be. Appendixes are also part of a lot of research reports, because there's so many tables that provide the information, the detailed information. So you've got kind of a summary, you've got the details in words, and maybe you have some charts and graphs. But then in the appendix, you might actually include the survey questions and the responses that you received, or maybe even more demographic information. So several techniques that are used to graphically display information are the typical things that we've all seen. We've seen bar charts. The bar charts are great for showing the frequencies, or the crosstabs, the t-tests, and the ANOVA that we talked about in earlier chapters. Pie charts, easy way to really recognize if you're looking at share of the market, or you're basing a decision and you want to graphically depict, how much, how significant a portion is compared to everything else. Tables, obviously, lots of numbers. Tables can help to kind of put things into categories, and again, show things maybe from a high to a low order, or how things kind of group together. Diagrams, especially when we talked about the constructs, a lot of times we use diagrams to show how one construct ties to another construct, or what the independent variables were and how they relate to your dependent variable, that again depict in a graphic way what it was that you set out to do, and helps the client, or helps your management understand that you put the time and the effort into understanding really how all of these variables and constructs relate to each other. Some of the problems that can be encountered when you're preparing a report kind of can go into, sometimes it can go into your limitations, but there may be times that you're just not able to get access to all of the data that you want, or you're not able to interpret something went wrong. You got to be upfront with these things. We talked very early on about the ethics involved, and you don't want to fake data. You don't want to try to come to a conclusion without really the statistical information to support that. There's unnecessary use of multivariate statistics. So again, you're trying to keep things as simple as possible. You don't have to get into a lot of complicated statistics for the kinds of decisions that are typically made in business. So you want to make sure that you're using the appropriate statistics based on what it is that the research objective was. Emphasis on the packaging rather than the quality. This, again, becomes kind of one of those, the marketing people get the more for the glamour and the glitz as opposed to the substance. So in this case, we're really trying to talk about it's not as important to have beautiful pictures if the pictures don't say what it is that we really have been able to find. So again, it's an appropriate type of information based on what it is that your goals were, and being able to convey that information in a way that's meaningful and useful and not just pretty. The lack of relevance would be the fourth problem that you can encounter. Again, that comes back to did you structure things, your research objectives, the way that it needed to be structured? Was there some sort of a miscommunication or some other problem that came up that you ended up with findings that ended up not being relevant? And it would be really important to not have that happen. But if for some reason it does happen, it's something that you need to be honest about. And you may not be able to use it if you're using something. If you've developed something internally, it may not go public. And if you've done it for a client, it sure would be good if this would have been identified much earlier in the process, so that you're not getting to the report writing stage and finding out that you don't have relevant findings. And then too much emphasis on a few statistical outcomes. So if you might end up having this big research project, and you've collected maybe 100 different variables, or you've had a survey that has 200 items. And you've gone through this big effort of collecting this information. If you collect that much information, a client or your management is going to expect to see quite a bit of information, because you've gone through the time and energy and effort, and someone else has gone through the time and energy and effort of providing you with that information, that you don't want to come up with something that is just one thing that really has, what's the big deal about it? So again, I think that a client would not be very happy if they would see that amount of money being spent on the collection of data and the analysis, that they're going to really want to see something that is worth the amount of money, the value to them of the amount of money that they've put into it, and they know the amount of time that's gone into it. The understanding of the importance of presentation in marketing research. So again, it's important to be able to present the information in a way that's professional. It's clear. It also has to convey the integrity of the research project itself and the researchers that participated on it. It's not going to be just about this report, but again, it's the credibility moving forward, either as for the company in particular, that might be a market research company that is doing doing research, or especially if you're doing it for a client, because just like we know in any kind of other repeat business, it's really going to be key to have done a good job and make sure that the client understands that you've done a good job, so that they feel confident in coming back to you, as well as letting others know that it's been worth the time and money that they've put into this. So all of these things come together. It's really key, just like the culmination of any semester-long project that you put together. You end up having a final either term report or some sort of a term project. it all culminates in, this kind of final presentation. So if you've done a good job, it's going to be key to make sure that all of these things kind of get wrapped up and put together into one nice package that presents, a clear path to help management or your client make decisions. And with that, I finish up Chapter 13, and thank you for your time.